My guest tonight is the acting chief executive of the National Petroleum Authority. As you know, that's the agency responsible for regulating the downstream sector of the petroleum industry. We've done a couple of interviews last week on the upstream sector, but tonight we'll be looking at the downstream sector. We'll be looking at deregulation, pricing, and really how we get deregulation working. Alex, thank you for coming.
Thank you, David.
Alex, as usual, you know, when I begin as rule, I like to get a sense of the institution that you represent and what it's there for so that we can set context. It's particularly more important tonight, and I'd like you to help us understand that, because there are quite a few organizations in if you like, the energy sector. We hear of the GNPC, we hear of the NPA, we hear of the Energy Commission, we hear of the Energy Foundation, and sometimes I think what that does is sort of blurs things. There are even the people that argue sometimes that maybe there are too many institutions and that perhaps we should be streamlining it. But I'd like to hear your views on that. But first and foremost, what is the role of the National Petroleum Authority?
National Petroleum Authority's role is to regulate the downstream sector. Doing that, we license all the petroleum service providers. We also monitor the compliance and safety procedures, and we establish the framework in which the deregulation process will be taking place.
It's NPA was not always there. It's a recent creation, isn't it? I mean, well, a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. It was established by an act in 2005.
Why? So that, who was performing that function before? What institution was performing the...
Well, there were a couple of institutions that performed it before. The first, one before NPA was the Tender Board, Petroleum Price Tender Board. And their main function there was to set the petroleum prices. And also to look at take some rules away from the Ministry of Energy in the deregulation process.
Any other institution?
Before that, I think most of it was done by Oil Refinery, and before that GNPC, and before that the Supply Commission. So in conjunction with the Ministry of Energy. So the Tender Board does not exist then? No, the Tender Board doesn't exist.
So it's been streamlined, would you say? I mean, what I'm trying to do is just get a sense of, you know, what has happened, that hopefully there are not just too many. Would you say that what's happened is that the functions of the Tender Board and a few other things that perhaps were in different places have all been put together under in the mandate given to the NPA?
Absolutely, it's an amalgamation of all of these. In the NPA we have 4 divisions. We have a technical division, and that technical division took over the roles of monitoring and inspection from the Ministry of Energy. We also have the pricing, and that took over the role from the Tender Board. The other 2 roles, administration and finance. But
let's talk about deregulation. This sector, I mean, this is a magic word, if you like, or one of these expressions that has been used for many years. Deregulation in this sector. What is it about?
Simply, it's about taking government away from regulating the downstream sector, the petroleum sector. Taking government away from running monopolies like Oil Refinery. Taking government away from establishing rules and regulations for the industry, taking government away from establishing petroleum prices, the pump prices that we have. You know, that is what deregulation about, and it's going to go in phases. We're not going to have deregulation tomorrow. It's not like a tap. You're going to turn it on.
Well, but no. But when you say that to me, that sounds like an excuse, Alex. You've spoken about deregulation for many years, and you're telling me now there is no deregulation yet completely, and that it will take some time.
Yes, deregulation started in 1996, and it started with Oil Refinery taking over the crude oil importation rule from GNPC, and it also evolved from 2003. Where Oil Refinery were now only restricted in importing crude oil and not importing petroleum products. In 2007, 3 bulk trading companies were licensed to take up the role of importing petroleum products, finished petroleum products, what you and I know as gasoline or petrol and gas oil, which is also diesel, into the country. These are the major products that they import. And the importation is to augment what Tema Refinery produces. Any shortfall driven by the demand that you and I require here.
But deregulation means that government must step aside.
In the end, total deregulation.
Do you really believe that in today's industry, the government has stepped aside?
We haven't fully deregulated. Like I said, it's in phases.
Why? What is the challenge? What is the challenge with deregulation?
Some of the challenges are ensuring that we have established the right framework, policies, codes, regulations. And to do this, it's not the prerogative of only government, but also the stakeholders in the industry. So we have a lot of committees set up which are producing these things. But in the end, I mean, when everybody talks about deregulation, people talk about one thing.
Prices.
Prices. And
we'll come to that.
In the end, that would happen.
But deregulation is not happening because, as you say, there is an absence of sufficient preparation. Why don't you do that before you talk about deregulation?
You're talking about the prices again. When you see deregulation, hasn't happened. Deregulation, like I said,
happened in many other areas.
There are phases, yes. For example, you know, private entrepreneurs can bring in, you know, lube oils into the country.
Do they do it?
They do. We give permits for that. Things like you have oil trading companies in Ghana that can bring in petroleum products.
Does it happen?
It happens. Oil marketing companies. We now have almost 50 oil marketing companies in the country. A few years ago, there were like about 6 or 8. Now, the deregulation process is basically setting a level field for people. And that's what we have to do before we go to full deregulation. We have to ensure that we harmonize all these regulations, and then we set also a very level playing field. You see, the primary objective of the NPA is to protect the consumer, but as well as to protect the investors, the private entrepreneurs that are in the downstream industry, to ensure that, yes, they do make a decent return on their investments. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of shortcomings, people not obeying the compliance issues, people violating regulations and codes. And that is what our primary focus is. Unfortunately, everybody sees the NPA as doing one job.
Pricing.
Setting the prices.
But it's an important component. I mean, in the end, that's what impacts us, the consumers.
Yes.
The prices of
not only the consumers.
And also
the stakeholders, the people importing it.
But let's talk about prices for say, gasoline prices. Okay, I'd like to focus on that.
On gasoline.
Yes, I'd like to talk about gasoline. Okay. I mean, isn't deregulation aimed at ensuring also that prices vary and that we have a choice and we can buy, for say, petrol cheaper here than there? Is that part of the intention?
So one of the things also the NPA does is we try to harmonize prices all over the country.
What do you mean harmonize when you have a deregulated environment?
Yes. I think it's important that, you know, the person at Boku should buy petrol almost at the same price as the person in Accra, you know, or Tema. The port is so close, somebody brings a product. So we have something called the UPPF. It's a pricing harmonization or stabilization mechanism so that the transporters would be paid for what they transport to the various locations based on an agreed formula with them. But it's not going to affect the consumer in the end. So that's one of the things we try to do. But pricing, I agree with you. Once we get into full deregulation, you would go to different, you know, petrol stations, even on the same street, and there'll be different prices.
Well, is that possible?
What the NPA does is we don't set the price; we set the maximum price. Unfortunately, everybody, you know, also just sets the price there. I've always asked the question: what if we set the minimum price? What would happen?
But then, what is the point? If you are going to set the maximum price and people are just going to go and pitch it there.
But that's where deregulation comes in. We see the consumer is looking for a service. The consumer, one of the things he looks for is for price, but he's looking for a service. So he's looking at, you know, quality, quantity, and He's looking to make sure that he gets the best benefit from the petrol station he goes to. So it's a marketing thing in the end. You and I, if we owned oil marketing companies, we would have to compete for the consumer's business. And I think deregulation is moving that way, where the likes of Shell, Star, Allied, Fraga, Goil are going to compete for our business. And it's not only on pricing, it's on the quality of services they give. You and I feel happy when we go and they clean our windows, they check our oil. Those are the kind of things that the consumer is looking for. Pricing, yes, but you're going to find the price differential is going to be, between stations so small, like you do when you go to Europe or any country that there's full deregulation. So
deregulation doesn't really mean in the end that we can get petrol a lot cheaper over there than over here.
It won't be a lot cheaper. It will be marginally cheaper, and it has to do with the way the petrol price is set, which I think is important people understand.
I'd like to discuss that, absolutely. Petrol prices. Petrol prices have gone up considerably, and it is one of those areas that just seems to sometimes you almost think that it's easy to lose control of it. I understand that it is a world market, a product on the world market, and that the prices are determined, for various reasons in a particular way. But tell me, Mr. Mould, is it possible for us to see petrol prices much more maintained and not rising so significantly, especially now that we speak about a discovery of oil in Ghana?
This question is a very loaded question. I'll see how I can answer it. I think, first of all, the petrol price we use in Ghana, which we call the ex-refinery price, which is the landed price that we give to people who import product or to the refinery. That landed price is totally based on an international market. And we base it on the most traded markets in the world, where every single trader goes to buy or sells the product. So we're talking about petrol, super. The super price, let's say in March, was around $380 per metric ton. The funny thing is that they sell it in tons, not in liters over there, international markets. And it rose to something close to $680, $700 by the end of May, early June. And that increase, is something close to 70–80% increase. But as you know, the pump price we pay is made up of the ex-refinery price, which is the landed price into the country, and also made up of taxes and distribution margins that go to the transporters and the bulk distributors, and the oil marketing companies. Before March, the last two components was almost 40% of the total export price. But because the prices had moved by June, it now formed only 22% of the total price. So the increase we saw on June 6, when we increased the price, was primarily had to do with international prices moving up. So crude oil also moved from 40 to 70.
We are at the mercy of international prices.
We are totally at the mercy of international prices.
So it is possible that if international prices double, we shall pay much more for petrol.
We should pay much more, unless we do some risk management. With risk management, I'm talking about protecting the price.
How can we protect the price?
By buying an insurance, or what we normally term as hedging, going into the swap market, the futures market, the options market, to protect the price.
That's risky business also, isn't it?
Well, not doing anything is very risky business, so like you said.
So is that something that you are considering?
That is less risky. Buying insurance for your car while you drive out of your yard is not risky business. You protect